Welcome to the Black Box App Podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth Johnson. Listen, Black Box, we are now in 50 million homes. We're on Airy TV. We're on Frontliners TV. Please do not hesitate to download the app. And we're also on YouTube. And you know I'll be sharing this across my social media profiles as well. Extremely excited today to have this gentleman on with us. When you start talking about people in careers that you want to amplify, especially as Black men, there's no better person than our guest today. We are here today with Mr. Raymond Perkins, research scientist at Meta. Yes, you heard it right. Research scientist, PhD at Meta. Raymond, welcome to the Black Box App Podcast, my friend.
Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you for having me.
Man, I'm really excited to have you. You know, usually I have, for maybe 90% of our guests, I have some prior interaction that allows me to kind of hone in and just think of questions that I think will be relevant. But with you, this is our first time chatting, and I can't be more excited, man. This is what it's all about for me. So I'm excited to have you on.
No, I'm excited. Always excited to connect with other professionals, especially other Black men. And if there's anything about my story or anything that I've done that can be helpful to others, more than glad to share.
Man, that's what it's all about here, amplifying the voices and sharing the stories of Black men. The Black Box App Podcast is really about the career consciousness portal for Black men called Black Box that we created about a year ago. And just for us to have you on is an immense responsibility. We want to share your story and we want to share it responsibly. So with that being said, I want to jump in, man. Now, I know you are currently in my hometown. You're out in the Philly area, but kind of walk me through your career journey.
Okay. Well, I'm originally from Columbia, South Carolina, born and raised.
Okay.
And when I think of my career, I'm going to start with education because a big part of my career so far, I mentioned the PhD, has been education. So started at Morehouse College and studied math and economics in Atlanta, Georgia. Then I went to Princeton University to a PhD in operations research, financial engineering. And then from there, I worked with Air Liquide, a gas company, for a little bit while I was completing the PhD. And then after that, I went into finance, worked at T. Rowe Price for a couple of years. I was a quantitative investment analyst, and I focused a lot on retirement products and developing portfolio allocation and management strategies. And then kind of made a turn in my career and decided to go to Meta after speaking to them. And I joined their people analytics department, where I work as a research scientist.
All right. If we can, let's just take a couple steps back. So you were in chemicals.
So I was in, yes. So I was in natural gas,
right.
But I was managing like natural gas contracts. I'm trying to figure out a better way to describe it, but yes.
I was just, because I'm looking at that, and then you end up at T. Rowe, very strong financial service line, and I'm just wondering how that happened and kind of what was the thought process going into that.
So it starts with my educational background, right? So I probably should have delved a little bit more deeply into that. I did a PhD in an area called operations research and financial engineering, and you can just think of that as an area of applied math, where the operations part is we focus on like industrial problems. The financial engineering, that's where you're focused on using math to make financial decisions, trading and risk management. My research focused on something called optimization. So my whole emphasis was, let's say you have a finite set of resources and you need to figure out the best way to allocate them in order to maximize something. And so for natural gas, we were working on problems where I need to store natural gas with the intent of either selling it or using it later. Now, prices change. How do I determine when I'm gonna hold it and when I sell it? It's not that different.
Okay.
And we were using financial contracts, so it's not that different than when you're talking about money.
Yes.
And now I'm just talking about people.
I got you.
Managing an asset.
Managing an asset, right? So speaking of managing an asset, as you kind of walked through, and I know you had mentioned you started out at Morehouse, you started this journey there, and then you found your way to Princeton. Wow, great institutions to kind of hone your craft or at least get prepared for the world that you're walking into. Tell me kind of about those experiences at Morehouse and at Princeton, and the similarities and the differences.
I'll say this: I'm a huge Morehouse advocate. I will always say, and I believe that going and attending Morehouse is probably the best decision I think for my career and for my life. When I think about Black Box podcasts and the network that you're developing, I think that's something that was kind of organically developed at Morehouse, right? And so I do strongly believe in networks and institutions like this. Um, you know, we were talking earlier about your son and going to college, and when I was there, I had no interest in studying math. It was actually I got put into a program where they encouraged me to pick up math as a major, just consider it for a while. In this program that was pushing for more Black PhDs, Black male PhDs. And that's how I got introduced to research. First time I ever had a Black male professor. And he ended up becoming one of my mentors. He kind of put me through all this research, started teaching me about things that were available and things I could do with a math background. And so that's where I really, I think, developed an interest in using math and applying it to industrial problems. After that, I actually was connected to a professor at Princeton through some of my professors at Morehouse.
Okay.
They knew I had an interest at the time. I thought I was going to go into mathematical finance, and they knew I had an interest, and they were like, I really think you should meet this person. You should meet Bill Massey, who was a Black professor at Princeton in that department. Really, one of those people I think you would put on, like, if there was a Mount Rushmore for like Black mathematicians.
Wow.
You would definitely put him up there. And we spoke, hit it off, and he was kind of speaking to me about research interests and opportunities. And he was like, I really think you have a strong background and you fit well into our program. And I was like, okay, I don't know anything about operations research, but like, let's do it. And I applied, and going to Princeton was different than being at Morehouse demographically. But I really do think that Morehouse kind of prepared me really well for that. And one thing I ended up really appreciating was the Morehouse alumni network at Princeton.
Okay. Okay.
And
I didn't think about that piece of it because, a lot of people speak to, and I don't know if this is still a conversation, but people have spoken to HBCUs not preparing people for mainstream society, right? But then as you're speaking on it and speaking about your experience, and there was a network that could kind of support that transition for you that was extremely helpful.
yeah, no, I grew up in a space where I was used to being a minority. South Carolina has a long history we don't need to go into.
Yeah.
But I think there was a benefit of being in a place, not only where I was in a majority, but in a place where it didn't seem as though I was coming from a disadvantage.
Okay.
And so having that mentality that like you are prepared for this, and then having a strong network of people who clearly show that they were prepared for this, I think I was able to walk into the world and walk into Princeton not as nervous, I think, as some of my other colleagues who didn't have that HBCU experience, right? I was in a place for 4 years where people were constantly building my confidence. And I think that was a huge benefit.
That's amazing. It's almost a case study for how things are supposed to work. You had a willingness to explore and listen to the advice of people that you believed had your best interest in mind. And then you networked, and then there was action on your part by following through consistently to kind of get where you needed to go. And then again, still have an openness to explore something different than maybe you had originally set out to do. Now let's talk about that. When you first stepped on the campus at Morehouse, you were going to be a what? What was it for you? Like, do what?
When I left high school, I was thinking no more math. And it's weird for me to hear it. I thought I was going to go into college, and then eventually the goal was to go to like get an MBA, go to business school. So originally I was thinking, well, I'll do economics. I still had a strong quantitative background, but I'll do economics and then go into finance. And I thought I was going to throw in a psychology a psychology minor because my thoughts were, behavioral economics.
Okay.
I could find value in this, and that changed very quickly.
Well, you know what? Change can be good. We're here on the Black Box App podcast having a conversation with Raymond Perkins, research scientist, and all out good guy, man. This is a great conversation. I really appreciate it. I want to speak about some of this transitioning into the workplace, and just not necessarily your experiences, but if you tapped back into your experiences as an entry level employee coming in and kind of getting your feet wet, what advice would you share with someone that may be watching the podcast and maybe in that position right now?
Oh, well, I keep thinking some of the best things that happened to me when I first started at Meta as well as T. Rowe Price and even Air Liquide, the network, right? And so being very intentional about trying to develop that network. So when you begin, a lot of people are willing to speak to you, and I was very fortunate that people who I didn't even directly work with, I just introduced myself. Hi, I'm new to this company. I'm just trying to get aware of the opportunities and the people who work here, and I'd love to just take 15 minutes out of your time, just to speak to you about this. And it allowed me to connect with people who would not directly interact with.
Okay.
It made me aware of opportunities, and also, I ended up meeting a lot of people who later were very supportive. I
So,
thought
so,
that was
so
great.
you took the informational interview approach, kind of like it, but now were you doing this over lunch, or were you just saying, listen, if I can just get a few minutes on your schedule just to stop by and chat, that'd be great.
I was trying to get whatever time I could.
Okay, okay.
So I found, I probably should take a step back. I also am a believer in using the network, so not only expanding it. So one thing I also did is I tried to look up if there was anyone I already knew who worked at the company,
Mm.
and then either ask them for introductions if they knew anyone else they would suggest I speak to, and then I would also cold call and or email, and then usually mention that someone had suggested that I speak with them. And I found that a lot of people were really willing to take coffee and lunch with me. That was really nice.
Man, you just walked me into a new workshop. We're going to create a workshop about networking internally, because we look at some of the approaches that you use. We look at that as a person that's outside of an organization looking to get on their radar. But I think once you're internal, it's probably still important to keep that process. You're still in sales mode, you're still in introduction mode, networking mode, and I think that's extremely important. So there's probably something to be said about crafting a strategy to do that internally.
I feel like getting in the company is just the first part of the interview. After that, you're trying to figure out where's the next promotion, how do you navigate to the next spot, and I feel like you're constantly interviewing for that.
So let's talk about that. Once you get that next promotion and you're kind of working in a middle management space, even if it's through tenure, you've been there 4 or 5 years and you're kind of middle management. What are the responsibilities for Black men that find themselves in that position? To younger Black men coming in, or just in general to their communities at large?
Well, I think one of being a person who's already existed as a minority, right, in a space, an underrepresented minority. Um, I kind of feel like you already have a special awareness of certain circumstances. I think, you know, knowing what it's like to be the only person within the room, also knowing the stereotypes that may be associated with you and the feelings that you have to do something extra just to kind of get the same level of recognition. I think knowing that and knowing that the playing field may be unfair or at least unlevel, I think you kind of have a responsibility to at least try to help someone who may be in a lower position than you. And so typically what I do is, especially if we have a new person of color, and I typically do this whether it's man or woman, 'cause I think we actually have a huge responsibility to our female colleagues as well. But usually I offer to just go, hey, do you want to grab lunch? Do you want to talk? And I try to fill them out first to figure out how much information you provide.
Sure.
But then try to give them an honest I think these are people who you should reach out to. I think there are opportunities here, and really just try to make myself an open resource. And I think I've avoided trying to push myself onto people, but making it available. And if a person is interested and they want to leverage you as a resource, then allow them to leverage me.
Sure. That's the interesting piece, right? If a person is open to that interaction, right? Because everybody may not be. And I think like we assume that, oh, automatically, yeah, they're going to want to have a conversation with me. But sometimes people are like, listen, I'm here on my own path and I'm going to find my own way through this. And that could be a personality thing or it could be a strategy.
I've learned identity is a complex thing, and not everybody identifies the way you think they identify. And so, you know, extending a hand, there's definitely people who, hey, I'm black, you're black. I just wanted, Issa Rae. I'm just rooting for everybody black. I want to support you.
Right.
And they got questions. Well, why are you talking to me? So
Yeah.
I've learned, make yourself available, but don't push.
So, at the organizations that you've been at, and we'll just in mass, right? Did they have employee resource groups that maybe centered on the Black experience in the workplace, or were you doing some of this independent of even that?
So they do have affinity groups, right? So T. Rowe Price has an affinity group. Meta has several affinity groups,
Sure.
and both of them I think were pretty present. At least you can see them and the work that they did. So I definitely make it a point to try to join those affinity groups, engage. I think there's opportunities and resources there, but I also kind of feel like no one's going to give it to you. So a lot of the work is maybe make connections in the affinity group. It's a great way to kind of be visible within the company, but also, not everyone attends those affinity groups. I'm still reaching out to them. And people have their reasons for not attending. And I think that's also important to realize why.
Sure. You know, as a recruiter, especially in an executive search space with a focus on diversity, here at East Coast Executives, so we're reverse engineering a process, right? Companies are coming to us and we're going out and finding people. But the overarching theme for people is that East Coast Executives helps Black people get jobs, right? Black and brown talent get jobs. So people come to us and they say, hey, I want to work here. And I'm like, they're not a client of ours. but here's what I suggest you do, right? And then I'll walk them through, something that I believe may get them on the radar of that particular company. But look, your organization, I always get it. I get Meta, I get Google, we get JP Morgan or Bank of America. Like we get all the big companies that people are interested in or have their eye on as a bucket list organization. If you don't mind me asking, how did you get to Meta? Did you seek them out, or did someone like me give you a call?
So someone like you sent me a LinkedIn message.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I had no understanding, I had no background, and knew anything about what people analytics the role was. I didn't have an interest in going into the HR part of a company, and so when the person originally reached out, um, I was a little surprised. But I kind of had as a rule of thumb as I take all calls. I think that's important for exposure. It allows me to know what's in the market, kind of price myself in opportunities. And while I was speaking to the recruiter and had a chance, through the process to speak people on the team, um, they really kind of sold it to me as like, this is not that different from what you currently do. And we could really use your skill set. And really, we think there's a great opportunity for you to grow. And, they also are a very competitive employer,
Well,
and
yeah.
that didn't hurt either.
It's interesting. Some people may take this conversation and say, wow, he's here. He's a research scientist at Meta. But what I'm hearing is you still saying, providing an opportunity for me to grow, providing an opportunity for me to grow. And as you look at your career, what does growth look like? I mean, and there at Meta, just what does growth look like as far as you from a personal perspective on what you need to do at this stage of your career?
So I still consider myself relatively early in my career. I'm 31, and I
Yes.
just turned 31 a couple of months ago. So right now, I'm trying to grow. And that means I'm trying to develop my skill set. I'm trying to develop my awareness. I want For me, it's important to be in a place where I clearly feel like my skill set is being expanded. Either I'm doing things that I haven't done before, I'm being exposed to projects that I haven't engaged with before, or I'm taking on additional responsibility that I didn't have before. Um, I I have some goals as well and other ambitions, and so part of that is I also need to see different aspects of companies. And so it's good to be in one area. But I thought being able to work in the HR area, I thought that was awesome because really learn a lot about how a company grows and how it thinks about itself and how it plans. So so exposure to skill as well as to responsibility are huge things. And as long as I find myself not feeling bored, or if I feel like at this point I can do this job in my sleep, that's a sign that I need to leave.
I got
Um,
you. I got you. Question for you. Did you come there during the pandemic?
yes.
So how was that? Like, were you guys remote or hybrid? How were things working?
When I joined, we were remote. So I joined, I joined in September 2 years ago. Um, and I remember they reached out to me beginning sometime in March. So it was funny. As soon as the country went into lockdown, then I think we started going remote at my former employer. Uh, there was actually a series of recruiters just started reaching out,
Yes.
and I went through everything remote. At the time, I was already commuting from Philadelphia to Baltimore, so I was excited to be able to go remote for a while.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, it's been really interesting to see how people view that and how they've adapted, especially coming into an organization new, because one of the big things about working remote is like how do you build relationships and get to know your colleagues. So yeah, just always interesting to hear people's approach on that. All right, look, as we kind of ramp down a little, I want to speak to you. I think this is a really important piece. Typically, and I'm going to call you a high achiever, friend. I can't call you anything else because I'm so excited about your career journey. And like you mentioned, you're 31, man. I'm really looking forward to speaking to you 10 years from now and saying, hey, what you up to? But
Appreciate it.
what do you use? Are there any resources, groups, books, anything that you've tapped into as a resource to kind of keep you focused, grounded, motivated?
I wish I could say that there was like a particular book, and I feel like I typically have a book for everything else in my life. One thing that I'm trying to think, one of the best resources has been my alumni networks.
Okay.
That and then LinkedIn. So one thing that I found is I've reached out to people on LinkedIn even if I don't know them.
Mhm.
There are also professional networks that I use, especially within like math or math related applied professional research groups. And from that, I've met a lot of other people. Those are, so I would say those are probably the largest things. I've got involved in local organizations. For a point, I was involved in a young professionals organization in Philadelphia as another way to meet people. Um, and recently, I've started engaging with nonprofit boards, and I
Okay.
found that has been also really helpful because it's a great way to give back, but also I get to meet a lot of more mature professionals, and they act as a resource in their own.
So if you're speaking those two things, young professionals, nonprofit boards, and Philadelphia, those three things, you already know Suleiman, I'm sure.
I have heard his name. We
Okay,
haven't had a chance to meet directly, but yes, I am aware of him.
great. If you want to, I can make that introduction. We'll talk offline. But yeah,
I appreciate that.
great dude, really good guy, does some amazing things out there in that market. So I have a lot of respect for him.
I've seen him on LinkedIn, and it seems
Yeah.
like they have a lot of interesting work because he's diverse. Is a diverse force
Reverse
as
force,
well,
right?
correct?
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. Exactly. LinkedIn is a great resource. That's kind of how I came across you and kind of initiated this conversation. A lot of people, I get this all the time. We do LinkedIn workshops, and we've done LinkedIn workshops for, I don't know, maybe since 2010. And I often get people to say, I'm not looking for a job. Why would I be on LinkedIn? And I'm like, you're missing that piece of it. What's your advice for people that kind of have that mindset regarding LinkedIn?
I mean, look, you may not be looking for a job, but I don't know. Maybe I'm fundamentally my thought and my I think philosophy about your career is fundamentally an opportunist. And so one thing is you keep your opportunities open. And so even if you're not looking for a job, you may not be looking for one today, but eventually you may be looking for one. And you really need to put in the footwork, the groundwork now.
Yes.
It's kind of like, what you plant now, you reap later. And so I think it's important to maintain that on a regular basis. Also, I think it's a great opportunity for you to be a resource to somebody else. You never know. There
Wow.
could be a younger person who wants to speak to you.
Yeah, I think, and that's the crucial part right there. And I was thinking along the lines of, there are certified subject matter experts on that platform sharing information
True.
constantly, a constant stream of information. So as people navigate their careers and they want to know what's next in their space, or what's the history of some work and things of that nature, or who the people are that are the influencers, that's where they exist. That's where they exist. So please take advantage of that. So as we wrap up here, Raymond, how does this audience stay in touch with you, or just kind of peek in on the things that you're doing professionally?
No, I try to keep my LinkedIn updated on a regular basis. Please feel free to reach out. I have a Candidly as well for
Okay.
anyone ever wanted to speak. My email information is there as well, and I'm always open to speak to people, especially if there's any way I can be helpful.
Man, that's amazing. It seems like that's genuine to your spirit as a helper. So kudos to you for one, the work you're doing, the people that you're supporting, and just being an active member of professional organizations that support um, individuals that are looking and in need of support. So I commend you for that type of work.
I appreciate it. Thank you again for the platform. I think this is wonderful. Really do appreciate
You know what? No, I didn't ask you the final question, and it's something I always ask people.
it.
Why do you believe an app like Black Box is important?
So I think it goes back to that discussion where I mentioned about how Morehouse has played such a huge role and having that network. And oftentimes, as Black men, we do find ourselves isolated in professional and corporate settings. And I think it's important to have a network that you can tap into, right? Some things where I feel like that information is spread organically through certain relationships. Not everyone has that. And I think what you've done is created a supplement for that. You've created a space where we may not physically be in the same space. We may not have directly ever had interaction, but we can still benefit from one another's experiences. And I think Black Box provides that. And I think that's something that's much needed.
Thank you so very much. It's Raymond Perkins, PhD, research scientist at Meta, but Morehouse alum, Princeton alum. This gentleman's really doing amazing things, man. I thank you so very much for spending some time with us today on the Black Box App podcast.
Thank you again for having me. It was a pleasure, Kenneth.